There are bad players that history forgets about, and there are bad players who get drafted first overall. The following guys didn't deliver, whether that be because of injuries, bad luck, or straight up being so bad no manager would let them touch the ice. Here are the worst overall picks in NHL history. Number 10, Ottawa Senators Alexander Daig, 1993. The Ottawa Senators selected Alexander Daig, the unquestioned number 1 prospect in the 1993 NHL entry draft, as the next great superstar to hit the NHL, so they reasoned. Daig entered the league after scoring 247 points in 119 games for the Victoriaville Tigers of the QMJHL. The Quebec Nordiques offered players like Owen Nolan, Peter Forsberg and Ron Hextall, as well as draft picks to draft the next great French Canadian. But the Senators refused and chose him with their first-round pick. He scored 20 goals and had a career-high 51 points in his first season. He accomplished it twice more throughout his career. But it's reasonable to say he never developed into the player he was destined to be. He was granted a hefty 5-year, $12.5 million contract to begin his career and never seemed to put in enough effort on the ice. I'm glad I got drafted first because no one remembers number 2, Alexander Daig, following his selection. Chris Pronger, a future Hall of Famer, was chosen second. Given the fanfare surrounding him prior to the selection, many would rank Daig higher on this list, although he did wind up playing 616 NHL games and scoring 327 points. Not precisely what was expected of him, but he performed better than many other players in their NHL careers, including those on the rest of this list. Number 9, Minnesota North Star Brian Lawton, 1983. Just because Brian Lawton is on this list doesn't diminish the fact that he made history. The centerman was the first American-born player to be taken first overall, and he is the first-round pick ever to come from a U.S. high school. Lawton entered the draft after scoring 171 points for Mount St. Charles Academy the previous 2 seasons and representing Team USA at the World Juniors and World Championship. The Minnesota North Stars chose him over Pat LaFontaine, Steve Yzerman, and Cam Neely. Lawton made the switch to the North Stars after being persuaded by the team to go pro. He spent 5 seasons with the North Stars, putting up decent numbers, 162 points in 303 games, but never living up to his first-round ranking. He was subsequently traded to the New York Rangers, where he spent the rest of his career bouncing between the NHL, the AHL, the IHL, and back. He played for 7 NHL teams, 3 IHL teams, and 1 AHL team between 1987 and 1993. He played for 4 different teams in 1989-1990. Number 8, Atlanta Thrashers Patrick Stefan, 1999. The 1999 NHL draft is widely regarded as the worst in history, beginning with Atlanta Thrashers selection Patrick Stefan. It's even worse when you consider the 2 players who came after him, Daniel and Henrik Sedin. Prior to joining the NHL, the Czech centerman played for the HC Sparta Praha in the Czech League and the Long Beach Ice Dogs of the IHL. The IHL was regarded as the world's second-best league at the time, and Stefan was an all-star despite being limited to only 33 games in his draft year due to a concussion. He then played in the NHL for only 7 seasons, 6 with the Thrashers and 1 with the Dallas Stars, where he will be known for one of the biggest blunders in NHL history. He never surpassed his career highs of 14 goals or 40 points. Overall, Stefan underperformed in his NHL career, yet he cannot be blamed fully. Stefan should not have been chosen first overall, and he would not have been had it not been for Brian Burke. Burke arranged a series of trades to assure he obtained the Sedin twins for the Vancouver Canucks, and in those deals he got the Thrashers the first overall pick with the promise that they wouldn't pick a Sedin. Stefan would have still been a failure, but not on this list. Number 7, Washington Capitals Greg Joly, 1974. This one takes us back a few years to when the draft was still known as the NHL Amateur Draft. The Washington Capitals joined the NHL as an expansion team in 1974 and were given the first overall choice in the draft. They went with Greg Joly. Joly entered the draft fresh off a 92-point season with the WHL's Regina Pats, which was followed by a 20-point playoff effort in 16 games. He was voted Memorial Cup MVP after leading the Pats to a Memorial Cup triumph. He was in high demand. Milt Schmidt, the first Capitals general manager, was at the head of this choice, hailing Joly as the next Bobby Orr. With 97 points in 365 games, I believe it's safe to conclude Jolly did not live up to the hype. His career was spent alternating between the AHL and the NHL, with the most of his time spent in the AHL. It was also not the case with the Capitals. Jolly played only 98 games with the team that picked him before being traded to the Detroit Red Wings. He finished his career with the Red Wings, capturing 2 Calder Cup championships with the Adirondack Red Wings. Number 6. Edmonton Oilers, Nail Yakupov, 2012. Everyone is familiar with the story of Nail Yakupov, the most recently drafted player on this list. After dominating the OHL with the Sarnia Sting for 170 points in 107 games and scaring international teams, the Edmonton Oilers selected Yakupov with their 3rd first-round pick in a row. Yakupov was drafted and went to the KHL's Neftekhimik Nizhnekamsk for the first locked-out 2012-2013 season, scoring 18 points in 22 games. Not terrible, everything appeared to be going well for the young guy. He subsequently made his transition to the NHL the following year, scoring 31 points in 48 games. The Russian winger then plateaued. He only played 3 more seasons for the Oilers, scoring 33 points once in 2014-15. They chose to let him go, moving him to St. Louis in exchange for Zach Pochiro, who never appeared in an NHL game. He only had 9 points in 40 games for the Blues, who let him go free. Colorado Avalanche signed him to a 1-year contract and he scored 16 points in 58 games. Yakupov was released and returned to the KHL for the 2018-19 season. He spent the previous 5 seasons with SKA St. Petersburg, Khabarovsk Amur and Omsk Avangard, scoring only 53 goals in 186 appearances. Number 5. New York Islanders, Rick DiPietro, 2000. Rick DiPietro, a more recent first-round pick, last appeared in an NHL game in 2012-13 before being released in the 2013 off-season. However, he will be compensated by the New York Islanders through the end of the 2028-29 season. DiPietro's case is unique in that the Islanders took a risk on him just 3 years after picking another goaltender, Roberto Luongo, 4th overall. The Islanders believed DiPietro had a brighter potential than Luongo and dealt him to the Florida Panthers. That did not turn out to be the case. After dominating the 2000 World Juniors and the NCAA for Boston University, DiPietro was expected to be the NHL's next top goalie. He did play 318 games for the Islanders, occasionally appearing like an average starter goalkeeper, but he struggled in net much of the time. To compound problems and add to the anticipation that he simply couldn't live up to, the Islanders signed him to a hefty 15-year contract worth $67.5 million in 2006. But between the deal, his troubles, the team's struggles, and a series of ailments that severely curtailed his performance, there was simply no way he could live up to the expectation of a first-round pick. We hope this video lives up to your expectations, and if it did, make sure you subscribe. Number 4. Boston Bruins, Gord Kluzak, 1982. Gord Kluzak, the first overall pick in 1982, might not be on this list if not for injury. However, the warning flags were there from the other players who were available to the injuries that preceded his draft selection. The defenseman impressed while playing with the Billings Bighorns in the WHL, scoring 71 points in 106 games over 2 seasons. He did, however, miss half of his draft year due to ligament damage. Nonetheless, General Manager Harry Simden believed in the young talent and chose him with the first overall pick. Some of the guys picked after Kluzak make the selection look even worse. Following him came Brian Bellows, and the top 10 included Ron Sutter, Scott Stevens, and Phil Housley. Later picks included Dave Andreychuk, Pat Verbeek, Ray Ferraro, and Doug Gilmour. Kluzak hampered what was otherwise a very solid draft year. His 299 games were spread across 9 seasons, with 2 seasons in the middle, 1984-85 and 1986-87, having him miss the entire season due to knee issues. Furthermore, in his last 3 seasons, he played only 3, 8, and 2 games before hanging up his skates. If it hadn't been for his injuries, he might not be on this list, but glancing at the names named after him doesn't help his case. Number 3. Detroit Red Wings, Claude Gauthier, 1964. To be fair to Claude Gauthier, none of the first 4 picks in this draft played an NHL game. Only 9 of the 24 players selected in this draft appeared in a game. However, Hall of Famers Ken Dryden, 14th, and Sue Apps, 21st, were among them. The stats from this period are sparse, but no NHL stats make it very clear. Guhle was the first NHL draft bust selected in the league's second round. Number 2. New York Rangers' Andrei Vaillu, 1965. The New York Rangers appear to have learned nothing from the Detroit Red Wings' last draft, as they drafted right-winger Andrei Vaillu first overall, never to play an NHL game. However, the top 4 draft picks did not appear in a single game. This year, just 11 players were drafted and only 2 of them appeared in an NHL game. Vaillu was a draft bust, but this draft as a whole was a bust. Number 1. Los Angeles Kings' Rick Pagnutti, 1967. Following a rather successful 1966 NHL draft, the 1967 edition returned to join 1964 and 1965. Rick Pagnutti was one of 18 players chosen, with only 3 making the NHL, and Pagnutti was not one of them. Pagnutti had a fairly extended professional career, playing in the AHL, IHL, CHL, WHL, and NAHL, winning the IHL's Best Defenseman Award in 1971-72. He didn't make it to the NHL, but he did continue to play professionally. If you enjoyed this video, click the link to watch the biggest 25 draft steals in NHL history.